Conflict is a part of the human family. Those things that make life interesting, that make life rich and dynamic, the ingrained diversity of creation itself, and even the human condition of free choice. These are also the very factors from which conflict emerges. The world was created in such a way that differences and conflict would be very normal. What if we imagine conflict not as a symptom of sin in the world, but an opportunity to connect with others and grow into more faithful people? Sin doesn't enter the realm of conflict until we respond in unhealthy ways. And because conflict occurs in the realm of relationships, our responses often drive people away or holds the possibility of drawing people together and creating more meaningful bonds between God and others. Because we can choose how to deal with conflict, we can also choose to either avoid it, which leads to separation, or we can treat reconciliation as a journey and move toward and through it. What will we choose?
Have you ever had an epic fail conflict moment? You know what I'm talking about. It's an event that went so incredibly wrong that the memory of it is just stuck in your brain forever. Maybe something that your friends are ever so kind to remind you about when you all get together. Hey, Robin, do you remember that one time when you know what I'm talking about. Well, welcome. I am Robin Harper. I am the communications and online campus pastor here at Southside Church. And each weekend, we have a number of people that come here. We have a Saturday night service. During the 8:30 service, we have interpretation for the deaf. There are online with us, which, hello, online campus, good to see you all. Online with us, we have from the youngest, we had a brand new baby with us online last week, to the oldest. And in our church building, every weekend, there are people who are here the first, second, third, fifth time, 100th time, 1,000th time, however many times you've been here. We're welcome. We're glad that you are here today, and glad that you came to hear this last message in the Conflict Message series. So when Pastor Wynn asked me to talk about conflict, and my topic was avoid and deny, I was like, yeah, I got this. I'm terrible at conflict. And I've been known to deal with conflict in all of the ways that we've talked about over the last 3 weeks. I mean, fight to win. When I'm right, and you need to know that I'm right, and even if I'm not right, I'm still right. Or there's head in the sand. Listen, I don't have to deal with something that I can't see or don't know that's going on. So that always seemed like a viable option. Or run and hide. Like if I'm running, I'm too exhausted to deal with the conflict, so there's no conflict. Right? So there's so many examples of epic conflict moments in my life. I wasn't sure which one to choose. There was the time when I was in college, and my college roommate moved out because I made a snarky remark to her boyfriend. Or there was the time I was in conflict with somebody and we're at a restaurant and I just sat there and cried. I was this blubbering fool the whole time and we never really resolved anything. Or there was the time where I vehemently defended somebody only to find out that my facts were completely wrong and I was way wrong in my defense of them. I mean, seriously, the story. So I had to narrow it down to one epic fail conflict moment. And so this is the one I chose because it's just so incredibly bad. So when I was in college, I was required to do an internship as part of my degree program. So I met with the professor and I got the syllabus and I set up the internship. And so for 12 weeks, I was off to do this internship. So I did everything that was required of me in the internship. And when I got to the end of it, I was super proud of myself. This was a self-directed class. I met every single deadline, did every single thing that the syllabus said I was supposed to do. So I scheduled the appointment, went back in with my professor, sat down with him, handed him the papers. So he kind of starts shuffling through them. And he gets this frown on his face. And he goes, well, this is good, but what about... And he says, what about this other part? And I was like, what are you talking about? And he hands me this other sheet of paper and says, you were supposed to do all of this stuff. And my full-on fight-to-win mode went into effect. And I was like, no, you never gave that to me. I knew nothing about this. And I mean, we went back and forth. And I learned very quickly the professor's right and you're not. But I was like, what am I supposed to do? And this professor was also my advisor, so I had to go above him, and I went to the head of the department. And I pled my case. I was like, listen, this isn't fair. I did my internship, I did everything, and now he's telling me I have all of this to do. And he was like, come on, Robin, just do the stuff. You've got to do it. And I was like, okay, wait a minute. We're not talking like one little paper here that I'd have to do, just suck it up and do it. We're talking like 20 major projects. Literally, the 12 weeks I had my internship probably wouldn't have been long enough to do everything that was required in it. So the professor had told me, you're going to have an incomplete on your transcript until you finish this. And so I just kind of figured, well, I don't know what I'm going to do, so I finished college with that big old fat incomplete on my transcript. And I just didn't care. I was like, whatever, it's not a big deal. Nobody's ever going to see it. So I walked across the stage at graduation. I've got the picture with everything on. And I was kind of justified it by like, nobody's ever going to know. It's not going to matter. So my fight to win mode did not work. So I was like, well, I'm just going to avoid it, deny it, whatever. It's not a big deal. And so it wasn't a big deal until it became a big deal. And my choice to avoid and deny the situation would eventually backfire, and it would be back at some point to rear its ugly head. So this was definitely one of my biggest epic fail conflict moments. And I can look back at it now and laugh or groan, which I do a lot. But in the moment, it was awful. It was all-consuming. It was all I could think about. I couldn't think about anything else. I couldn't talk about anything else. And I know. I should have just dealt with it at the moment. But instead, I didn't. I chose to drag it out over years because I was avoiding and denying the reality of it. So have you ever had an epic fail conflict moment? Has it felt like this month, since we started talking about conflict, that you've had more opportunities to deal with conflict? I mean, it seems like once we start talking about something, it's like, oh my goodness, can it just stop? There's so much. But the good news is you're not alone. Conflict is something that we all have to deal with. And conflict is not new to our world. You can pick up any American history book and look through it, and you will see story after story of conflict. And the reasons for the conflict are different. It's money, inheritance, land rights, property, greed, and sometimes just plain old pride. Or pick up your Bible. You can see from Genesis to Revelation, there are stories of conflict in it. The book of Esther that Sharon spoke about 2 weeks ago was all about one man's ego that was going to wipe out an entire civilization. And believe it or not, there's even stories in the Bible of conflict that Jesus was involved in. Now, it's super easy in American culture to think Jesus was this laid-back, soft-spoken, gentle, pacifist sort of person, but in reality, he dealt with tough issues. He had the tough conversations. He stirred up the religious leaders with his words. He went against cultural norms and did crazy things like healing on the Sabbath, and then talked to the religious leaders and like, all right, which is worse, to let the guy go on with his suffering or to heal him? And Jesus dealt with conflict even among those who knew him the best. So there's one story in particular that is an epic fail conflict moment with one of his disciples. And the fail is so epic, it's recorded in all 4 of the gospel writings in the New Testament. Now, if you don't have a Bible and you have a smartphone, go into Google Play, go into the Apple App Store, just type in Bible, you'll see it right there, just download it so you can follow along with what we're talking about today. Okay, so the first 4 books of the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They're all considered the gospel writings. And in each of these books, the authors wrote from different perspectives. But this is one story that ends up in all 4 of the gospel writings. So we're going to focus on the narrative as it was written in the books of Matthew and in the book of John. And this is known as Peter's denial of Jesus. Okay, right from the title, right there, you know this must have been something big. And the original readers of it would have known the seriousness of the event. They all knew who Peter was. He was kind of a big deal for his time. One of the historical authors states, Peter was enthusiastic, strong-willed, impulsive, and at times brash. So when Peter messes up, he does it big time. So if you have a Bible, go ahead and follow along. We're going to go into Matthew chapter 26, and I am reading from the New Living Translation. We are starting in verse 31. So it's Matthew 26:31. Jesus told them, he's speaking with the disciples, "Tonight all of you will desert me, for the scriptures say, God will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I have been raised from the dead, I will go ahead of you to Galilee and meet you there." Peter declared, "Even if everyone else deserts you, I will never desert you." Jesus replied, "I tell you the truth, Peter. This very night, before the rooster crows, you will deny 3 times that you even know me." "No," Peter insisted, "even if I have to die with you, I will never deny you." And all the other disciples vowed the same. So did you hear Peter in that? The ego, the pride. I mean, everybody else is going to bail on you, Jesus, but not me. I'm your man. I'm going to stick by you no matter what. I mean, he's so emphatic with his statement. Peter even goes a step further and says, "I'm not going anywhere, but I am with you to the death." Okay, so we're still in Matthew 26. Now we're going to jump down to verse 69. And we're picking up the story after Jesus was arrested. Meanwhile, Peter was sitting outside in the courtyard. A servant girl came over to him and said, "You are one of those with Jesus the Galilean." But Peter denied it in front of everyone. "I don't know what you're talking about." Later, out by the gate, another servant girl noticed him and said to those standing around, "This man was with Jesus of Nazareth." Again, Peter denied it, this time with an oath. "I don't even know the man." A little later, some of the other bystanders came over to Peter and said, "You must be one of them. We can tell by your Galilean accent." And Peter swore, "A curse on me if I'm lying. I don't even know the man." And immediately, the rooster crowed. Suddenly, Jesus' words flashed through Peter's mind. "Before the rooster crows, you will deny 3 times that you even know me." And he went away, weeping bitterly. So I think you get the reason why I'm calling this an epic fail. We might give Peter a little bit of grace if it was just one time. I mean, it was crazy. There was so much going on. He was panicking. There was stuff going everywhere. But he does it not just once. The second time, he backs it up with an oath. And the third time, as if the hole wasn't big enough that he just dug, he declares a curse on himself. I kind of feel sorry for Peter. Kind of. I mean, I've made some big mistakes in my life. I've messed up big time. But I'm fairly certain none of my friends have sat down, pulled out some paper and a pen, and decided to write it all down to be published for the next 2,000 years so people can come along and sit and nitpick at it. I mean, that's an introvert's nightmare. Okay, so considering the theme of this message, let's look at how Peter did all 4 of them. Fight to win. I mean, I would say the 3 denials are definitely a fight to win. He didn't just answer. He was emphatic in his answer. Not just a simple no, but I'm going to call curses on my head if I'm lying. Head in the sand. Jesus was clear with Peter what was going to happen. And instead of heeding the warning, he went ahead and just did it. He didn't make a change. He just pretended like there was nothing there. Or run and hide. I mean, he was hiding behind his words, his personality. He was not about to be associated with Jesus and risk his own death. Okay, so how does Peter's denial fit in with today's topic of avoid and deny? Well, we're going to go on with the story, which is the story of Easter. So Jesus is accused, he's beaten, forced to carry his own weapon of death, nailed and hung on a cross, he dies, and is resurrected. Okay, so I realize I just took the story of Easter and made it quick 6 bullet points there, in an event that literally changed the entire course of history. So Lent, which are the 40 days that lead up till Easter, starts this year on Wednesday, March 6th. And I challenge you, take those 40 days, study, learn more about the events of Easter, learn what everything that happened from Jesus being arrested all the way through the resurrection. So as a church, we're going to be doing a Bible plan in the Bible app, and it's called Journeying with Jesus, 40 Days Lent Devotional. It's listed right down here on the bottom of the sermon notes, so you can look it up later and join in with it. So we're going to start together on that on March 6th. Okay, so now we're back to Peter. Peter really didn't have any time or chance to apologize to Jesus to make things right. I mean, I guess he could have stood at the front of the cross and, declared his repentance. It would have been very dramatic, but it didn't happen. Peter was most likely present for the crucifixion, even though it's never directly said, but for once, he was quiet. He made up, probably in his mind, that he had missed the chance to make things right. And his avoiding the truth and denying his relationship with Jesus left him empty and hopeless. Okay, so we've talked a lot in this message series about conflict and various ways to deal with things. And hopefully by now you at least see the reasons why we need to deal with conflict and recognize in your own life the effects of unresolved conflict. And if you haven't seen the messages or need to go back, just go back and watch them. They're on the app under the media section. But today I want to take what we've learned in previous messages and do a little role play. So I've invited my trusty sidekick, Steve, to come join me. And if you don't know Steve, Steve is my husband. He was youth pastor here for many years, and most recently, he is now the executive director of X-Zone, and we never have conflict. So we've got 26 years of dealing with conflict really badly and really well. So what are some areas that you see of conflict in people's lives?
Probably the two I see the most. I call them the two M's of conflict. The first one is money. You deal with someone's money on a regular basis. They have expectations or they have different things there. You go to a restaurant and you order your steak dinner and your steak comes out and it's like medium rare and you ordered it well done, right? Or it's not whatever, it didn't come out the way and you're paying for it, so you want it the way you want it. We get kind of unrooted a little bit with that. In fact, I've sat in restaurants where I've watched people and I'm going, well, that wasn't good for the witness today because how you responded brought a really big conflict and everybody felt icky. The other M is the one that's probably the hardest of all, and it's our mouth. Our mouth is a big piece. Bible talks about the fact that our mouth really kind of speaks what our heart is full of. It's a mirror of what's happening inside. So those two things the mouth can produce some wrong communication if pride's involved or other things are there and so forth.
Sure. So let's role play. And let's role play something that's normal in our marriage and maybe not. All right. Steve, it is 4:20. Grant just called me. He's at Manchester. You were supposed to be there at 4 o'clock. You're not there. Why are you not there? I don't know how many times I have to tell you. I texted you a half hour before to remind you. I texted you 15 minutes beforehand to remind you. I put it on your calendar. I mean, what more can I do? Why do you not see this important to be there on time to pick up your child?
I just got sidetracked. I was not focused. I'm telling you, I was there. I promise you, I was putting my stuff away. I started walking out the door. I got two people who walked in my door. I mean, how in the world do I say no to church people who walk in the door at the last moment? I mean, I got to handle this, right? It's my job.
Whatever. It's the same old excuse all the time. I mean, seriously, I just want you to be on time when you're supposed to be there. When you say you're going to be there, you're supposed to be there. Our poor child is sitting out in the rain, probably freezing to death, and
I get it. I'm trying to do everything. He's not freezing. I'm sure he's not hungry. I'm sure he's got something else going on, but I'll get it. What do you want me to do?
I want you to get there now. Okay. Now let's handle this a little bit better. See if we can't come with a little better. Okay.
No one's ever forgot their children, I'm sure, in this room. Anyway.
Especially ours. Okay. Hey, Steve, it's 4:20. Grant just called me and said that you haven't picked him up yet. Is everything okay? Do you need me to help out with something? Like, what's up?
Yeah, I do. And I need to apologize. I'm sorry. I got sidetracked in focus, how I get, and I didn't keep an eye on the time, and I should have communicated to you. I did not. And so I do need a little help. This is what has happened. I got sidetracked with some folks coming in. and I need to do a better job at it. It's my fault. What do you need me to do now?
Okay, can you go pick him up, or do you need me to go get him?
I can leave right now, and I will do so.
Okay, so next time that this happens, can you just kind of just give me a quick little note, hey, something's come up, and can you go, like, okay.
Yes.
Okay, probably a little better way to deal with it, even though I'm still irritated, but, because I'm still right.
I promise you no.
So, do you have anything else you want to talk about?
Well, I
about
promise you no
conflict?
children were harmed in this incident of any kind. Anyway, I think the big key in our conversation here is that as human beings, we're bound to have some conflict. We're flawed. We're going to have it. It happens at our work world. It happens at the other. But the distinguishing things between our conversation help deflect and get things to a part where you can get to an agreement. The first way, all I did was blame and make excuses and do those things, and that was not going to get us to the resolve that needed to happen. It was my fault. There's that pride again, right? Guys, we're good at this. I think we're all good at this. I'm a guy, so I think sometimes our pride gets a little bit more, but I think in coming to it, when we can acknowledge where our fault is immediately, or take ownership to something quickly. And there are times in conflict I've had to take ownership to things that sometimes I didn't do. But I recognized it was for the best to get to what is going to be the resolve. Because really, honestly, if you're a Christian, the only conflict thing that needs to come to resolution, the only person that really needs to be right in any conflict is the Lord.
Sure.
In the long run.
Well, thank you for being my trusty sidekick
You're
today.
welcome.
So do you have any conflicts going through your head right now, like something that you've thought about, you've dealt with, and you're like, oh, I could have done that better, or that person was so wrong. If they would have just... All right, so I did a little Facebook informal poll, and some of you responded on that. Thank you so much. Your information was extremely valuable in helping me prepare for this message. And so here are some of the responses that I received, kind of in a general sort of form. The first one was finances. Finances came up over and over. How do we spend our money? Where's the money going? We don't have enough money. Teenagers. I mean, it's a reality. When you bring kids into your family, there's going to be conflict because you're going to disagree maybe on how to deal with them. Selfish behaviors, ineffective communication, being overscheduled. You have little margin, little gap. Marital infidelity, assumptions, expectations, faith differences, just a plain old lack of trust. There's so many different causes of conflict, and if I brought a whiteboard up here and we just threw out different answers, I'm sure we could fill it. But you get the general idea. There's just so many different ways that conflict comes into our lives. And so when our expectations don't match up with what we experience, it creates a gap. And so we have to make the choice, what are we going to do with that? Are we going to believe the best, or are we going to believe the worst? Are we going to fight to win, to make what we expect to happen? Are we going to just bury our head in the sand and say, whatever, that's just how they are, that's just who they are? Or are we going to do what I did in college, where what I expected was a finished class, didn't line up with what I experienced, a giant stack of papers and a big old fat incomplete on my transcript? What are we going to do? Are we going to just choose to avoid and deny it? Okay, so now here's my disclaimer. And I gave it when I spoke about forgiveness before. Conflict is not an easy topic. It's not a one-size-fits-most how to deal with things. And there are great resources available that can help you in dealing with a specific conflict you're dealing with. And so if you don't know, you're going to know I love books. And so I got to come up here with a book. And so this book was written by Drs. Henry Cloud and John Townsend, and it's called How to Have That Difficult Conversation. And it's a really good book. You can see my little highlights in here. It's not an easy read. This is not just a fun, you're going to plow through it sort of book. But there's very specific examples in here. You're dealing with this. This is a better way to deal with it. Here's a bad way to deal with conflict. Here's why conflict goes on. It's a really good book. I highly recommend it. You may be dealing with a conflict, and you need to go outside of just reading a book, and you need some outside help with it. Here at Southside Church, we offer a ministry called Celebrate Recovery. It meets here on Friday nights at the courthouse campus at 7 p.m. It's going to be meeting at our Chester campus. Watch for details. We'll give more specifics on when they're going to be meeting. But the ministry looks at God's healing power in our life through the 8 recovery principles. Conflict can bring pain, and Celebrate Recovery is a great place to work through the hurts of life, as well as habits and hang-ups. Or you may require the help of a professional counselor to deal with conflict or the aftermath of conflict. Footsteps Counseling is a place that I highly recommend. It's a partner of Southside Church, and they have 4 locations throughout the greater Richmond area. They have counselors who will walk you through it. They have a location right here at the courthouse campus. So if you need a professional counselor, I would recommend contacting Footsteps. So we've put out so many different ways to deal with conflict throughout the series. Just know you're not alone and that there are resources to help you with it. Okay, so now we're going back to Peter. We saw his epic fail. I mean, when he crashes, he does it big time, and we're still reading about it. I mean, you imagine how he felt, like he had this plan over in his head over and over, the conversation with Jesus and then the denial, and the conversation with Jesus and the denial. I mean, can you relate with Peter? Have you ever had a conflict that just sticks in your head? So we're going to jump now to the book of John to finish the story. We're in John chapter 21, and we're going to start in verse 1. So later, Jesus appeared. This is after Jesus' resurrection. Later, Jesus appeared again to the 7 disciples beside the Sea of Galilee. And this is how it happened. Several of the disciples were there: Simon Peter, Thomas, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and the 2 other disciples. Simon Peter said, "I'm going fishing." "We'll come too," they all said. So they went out in the boat, but they caught nothing all night. At dawn, Jesus was standing on the beach, but the disciples couldn't see who he was. He called out, "Fellows, have you caught any fish?" "No," they replied. Then he said, "Throw out your net on the right-hand side of the boat, and you'll get some." So they did, and they couldn't haul in the net because there were so many fish in it. Then the disciple Jesus loved said to Peter, "It's the Lord." When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his tunic, jumped in the water, and headed to shore. Okay, now we're going to jump down to verse 14. This was the 3rd time Jesus had appeared to his disciples since he had been raised from the dead. After breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" "Yes, Lord," Peter replied. "You know I love you." "Then feed my lambs," Jesus said. Jesus repeated the question, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" "Yes, Lord, you know I love you." "Then take care of my sheep," Jesus said. A 3rd time he asked him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter was hurt that Jesus asked the question a 3rd time. He said, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." Jesus said, "Then feed my sheep." This isn't exactly the conflict resolution story I was expecting, and definitely not how I would have dealt with it. So this account is from the 3rd time that Jesus had been with the disciples following his resurrection. And Jesus did not deal with Peter the way that I thought he should. I mean, why didn't he confront Peter at one of the earlier times? Why didn't he come out of his grave, wagging his finger at Peter, saying, "See, I told you so. I said you were going to deny me. Everybody heard it. And boy, howdy, did you mess up big time. Come with me to the grave." Yeah, whatever. This is one of the most gracious stories of redemption. I mean, I shake my head at it and I wonder why. I think Peter deserved a pretty good old tongue lashing. But that's not how Jesus dealt with him. He asked him the same question 3 times. "Do you love me?" When Jesus asked Peter the question, "Do you love me?" do you notice how he started the question? He says, "Simon, son of John." He called Peter by his given name, not by the name that Jesus had given him. When you look back in John chapter 1, verse 42, Jesus gave Peter his name by saying, "Your name is Simon, son of John, but you will be called Cephas," which means Peter. I mean, Peter had broken his relationship with Jesus. He willingly chose to deny Jesus, deny any knowledge, deny the relationship with him. He chose to be just like everybody else, part of the crowd. He chose not to be who Jesus had called him to be. He was called Peter, which means rock. So Peter, in one decision, chose to go back to his old life before Jesus, life before walking with the Messiah, life before seeing miracles and healing, life before freedom from sin. So maybe Peter went fishing that day just to bring back some normalcy in his life. I mean, he knew Jesus was alive. He had seen him, but nothing was the same. Everything had changed, and yet Peter was back to his old self. Okay, so now we're going to go back to my story from the beginning. I pretty much had resolved myself that my decision for the class was okay. I had walked across the stage at graduation, but there was that one big looming thing over my head. You know, that very expensive piece of paper that you get that says that you have finished the requirements for the course. I figured when God called me to ministry, I was the behind-the-scenes girl, and I was completely okay with that until I wasn't. So one Sunday, I was sitting right over here in service, and I felt the Lord very strongly say to me, you need to finish what you started. And I didn't have to question, I didn't have to do any of that. I knew exactly what it meant. God had called me into ministry. He called me to be an ordained elder in the Church of the Nazarene, and I couldn't do that because I had that big old giant fat incomplete on my transcript. So I had to go back to my college. And by now, the professor and the head of the department were long gone. So then I have to tell the story to somebody I didn't know, completely new. And I had to write everything out, and I had to explain it. And in the letter, I said, I will do whatever it takes. If that means I have to re-enroll in college and take this class, I will do whatever it takes to make this right. My choice to avoid and deny had completely blown up in my face. And you want to talk about a really embarrassing, humbling experience. And it wasn't only that in my college I had to tell the story, I also had to tell it here on the Virginia district to the leadership because they needed to know why I had this incomplete on a very important class. I have lost count of how many times I've told the story and how many people I've told it to. But 23 years after I walked across the stage at graduation, can you guess what's in here? I got this very expensive piece of paper. And because I got this, I was able to get this, which is my certificate of ordination in the Church of the Nazarene. So why do we avoid and deny conflict? I mean, why do we choose to go back to an old life when we fail rather than working through the conflict or the separation? Why do people stand and proclaim their belief in Jesus, surrendering their life to him, and yet when times get tough, life gets hard, things don't go the way they plan, they just walk away from their relationship with Jesus? So have you ever considered the fact that we not only have conflict with our fellow humans, but that we can have conflict with God? So how do we have conflict with God? Okay, have you ever heard somebody, or maybe said yourself, God must be mad at me because of fill in the blank. I prayed, but God isn't answering me. I'm not going to pray because every time I pray, the exact opposite happens. Or I'm too smart, too rich, too educated, too athletic, too attractive, whatever, fill in the blank. Why would I need God? I have everything I need and more. The list is endless as to the reasons we have conflict with God. And it's funny because we're so uncomfortable with conflict with our fellow human. But when it comes to having conflict with God, it's almost accepted. It's expected in our world. And we don't expect any sort of repercussions from that conflict. So yes, God is an all-loving, all-knowing, all-powerful, ever-present. He created all, sustains all, puts all into motion, and yet he is so amazingly patient with us. So did you see how Jesus handled the conflict with Peter? He asks him just a simple question. Simon, son of John, do you love me? So we spent a great deal of this message series talking about the conflict we have with our fellow humans. But we also have to look at ourselves and consider our conflict with God. So what is it in your life that has you in conflict with God? What have you been avoiding or denying in your relationship with Jesus? Have you proclaimed your faith only to deny him when the pressure is on? Today is a day of change. It's a fresh start. A time that you can settle this conflict with God and either start new with God or return to the relationship you had with him before you walked away. Now, when I went to college, I was 18 years old. I was not a Christian. I did not have a relationship with Jesus. And it was during a chapel service that I began to understand. My eyes were open, and I could see this conflict that I had with God. And so I came to an altar just like the ones we have up here, and I poured out my heart. And that was the first of many trips I took to the altar. in my understanding of full surrender to Jesus. So today, I invite you, spend some time talking with Jesus. Let's pray. Father, thank you that on a Sunday morning we can come and talk about conflict. And we can talk about conflict as we see it in our world and as examples we've seen throughout history. But God, we can also see that we have conflict with you. That for whatever reason, there's a barrier between us and you. So God, I pray for your Spirit to move, fill this place. Speak to each person. I know you have a different message for everybody. Maybe it's something that they've just dealt with and it's been festering for years. Maybe it's something new. Maybe they're ignoring a call. Maybe they're just not doing exactly what you wanted them to do. So God, I ask that your Spirit would come, speak to us as we spend some time here just talking with you. In Jesus' name, amen.